little room. Welcome to Paul's little room. As you'll notice, I'm wearing a different shirt today. My other one's dirty, and in the vein of these 1990 headphones, I thought I'd wear a 1990 style shirt. Anyway, so the headphones, these are the Sony MDR-7506. Now, these are professional monitoring headphones. They have been around for a very long time, as I said, from around about 1990, a very long time ago. And you can still buy these exactly the same as they were then. There have been some small revisions. This is a more recent pair. This pair I bought minty condition, but these are around about 4 years old, and there has been a more recent revision, just a slight cosmetic change. So if you go to buy these now, you'll notice just a few slight cosmetic differences. Now, these pads are replacements. The originals these came with are a little bit uncomfortable. They're a little bit firm and not very forgiving. These are just nice and soft pleather. They're cheap, but they're very much more comfortable. You'll notice a lot of reviewers who own a pair of these have replaced them with their own pads. I think Yaxi is a quite popular brand people buy pads for these from. Now, recently I did a review of the Beyerdynamic DT770 Pros, and these are just the limited edition black pad version. So please have a look at that review. I made a comparison with the Custom One Pro by Beyerdynamic. Now, I bought these so that I can record my own piano music, and I needed something which I could just bung on, nice and accurate sound, where I could listen to the piano notes very well. I wanted a relatively good sound stage representation. I wanted an accurate depiction. I didn't want them to be overly bassy, and I didn't want there to be an excessive amount of upper treble sharpness. These do have a little bit of a peak in the mid treble. They've got a nice amount of warmth in the mid bass, and thanks as well as having nice shaped pads, because of the round shape, large generous size, these do actually space, these do stage very well. And of course the build quality is absolutely fantastic. I find them very comfortable, and I don't mind the fact that this is the attached cable version. Now, for the same price you can also get the Sonys. Now, I'm just going to very quickly tell you my point system out of 10, the pros and cons of these versus these, and hopefully I'll help you decide if you feel, are you recording your own music? Do you feel, oh, I'm going to give those a try, versus the competition of other professional recording headphones that you've seen adverts for. Anyway, so first off, let's talk about the build. Now, these, the Sonys, it's mostly plastic. These shells, let me see, I think that's plastic too. Maybe that might be aluminium, but it is a very plasticky feeling headphone. It's a very light build, and these are designed to be very, very versatile. So now, unfortunately, I can't swivel this to face me very easily. If I put these on, what DJs sometimes do is they do that, they do that. But you can see you can get a good amount of twist in this headband, and there's no risk of you breaking them from doing that. Now, being wired on one side, the cable goes over through the headband, and you'll notice there's a slight weak spot in that the cable is here, and when you adjust these headphones, not the most accurate adjustments, but they work fine. You'll notice that cable is a vulnerable area, but these are very, very reliable based on what I've read of other people using them over many years. And also, if you do break this, they are fixable. Not as fixable as these, I must say. The beyerdynamics, you can actually take these apart very easily, and every component is easily replaceable. And in fact, you can replace the drivers of these without needing a soldering iron. These you will, but again, they're quite easy to take apart. Simple pads which are just fitting into a groove here, and they just screw apart very easily indeed. Now this, even though it's quite firm, it's a vinyl-like material. There's nothing posh about this build. They look quite, I think they look kind of snazzy, kind of retro, but everything is functional. You've got a good amount of swivel inwards, but you don't have much tilt going outwards here. If you have a very large head, if you open these out wide, you'll notice there's a limit to the extent that these can actually pivot outwards. But if I make these the largest they'll go, because of the flexibility of the band, it negates part of that issue. So if I stretch these, it's not too bad. You can get away with having a very large head indeed. If I make these the smallest, and by the way, there are increments marked on here. It has little numbers on this stainless steel band. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So if I do that, and yes, so at its smallest setting, this headphone's actually too small for my head if it's on its smallest setting, which is fantastic. So these will accommodate the very largest heads and the very smallest heads. Now, looking at the pads again, I like the shape of these pads. They don't have a lot of width to them at all. These are approximately 30 millimeters wide, the opening, and they're approximately 50 millimeters deep, so much taller than they are wide. And I mean, tall, yeah, that way. Depth wise, there isn't much depth here at all. I would say it's approximately 20 millimeters, maybe even less. And when these actually compress on your head, it's considerably less. But there's a little bit of padding in here, and because the clamp force is, I would say, a medium pressure, these aren't the most clampy headphones you'll find. It's a manageable comfort level. Padding on here is relatively minimal. There's just a small amount of foam in there, and then there's plastic underneath. However, these are nice and light, and that clamp force really prevents anything pulling down, and you do not get any hot spots. Well, I don't get any hot spots on the top of my head. Now, the cable, it's completely standard for studio headphone. It stretches to about 3 meters long with this coiled part, and you've got an adapter here, 3.5 millimeters to 6.35 millimeters. It's very standard, and it's quite soft. I like how soft this cable is. It's about the same feel as one of the Hifiman cables. So this is one of the more affordable Hifiman headphone cables, and it feels the same. So similar thickness, similar softness, very, very standard, but perfectly fine and durable. Now at the headphone end here, you've got just a little bit of rubber here for a bit of strain protection, and then this will eventually wear out if you're particularly rough with them, but it's absolutely fine. Now if you look at the Beyerdynamics, you've got a bit more of an engineered strain protection here. It's a little bit more substantial. Okay, so I just have a feeling overall with the Beyerdynamics, you'll definitely feel a better quality, a higher standard of build than with the Sonys. Okay, now these both retail for around about 110 UK pounds, or maybe 120 UK pounds when they're brand new, and definitely in the hands the Beyerdynamics feel like you're getting more for your money than with these. Now on the spec sheet as well, you're getting Tesla powerful magnets with the Beyerdynamics, and what that equates to in the bass response is a little bit more energy, a bit more power, and also slightly smoother, more accurate bass with the Beyerdynamics than with the Sonys. Now before I just go ahead and do my how much out of 10 comparison, I'm just going to very quickly mention another professional recording headphone which I've had for quite a while. These are the Ultrasone Signature Pulse. Now these really are designed for DJs. They have good noise isolation. The pads these came with were absolutely horrible. So I recommend, have a look at my review for these, by the way. These are fantastic. I really like how punchy they are. They've got good separation for such a punchy headphone, actually. Comfort wise is middling really. They're not the most comfortable headphones. Out of the box when you buy them, there's a high clamp force. If you have a very large head, they can really clamp tight, and because these actually have a special system in here, the S-Logic 3, I'm going to take this off just to show you. With the original pads, this kind of plastic system here, it's designed for directing the kind of sharp sound waves away from the opening of your ear to hopefully protect your ears. Your ears can rub on this, okay? But with new pads, with replacement pads, soft pads, I'm not having any problems with this at all. Now these are more expensive headphones. These retail for about £450. They're an expensive headphone, but there is a substantial performance advantage with these over the Sonys and over the Beyerdynamics. They've got more separation, there's more information between the notes, in between the different instruments, and even though they're not the very largest sound stage, I would say the imaging, my ability to actually point to various elements of the music are exceptional with these. Okay, vocals, even though they're slightly recessed, so there's a slight V profile, relatively spicy mid treble, smooth upper treble, punchy bass, plenty of mid bass and lower bass, but somehow because of that separation, the vocals, they come across really beautifully, and you can notice those vocals. You're not going to get that ability with these, okay? And in that way, I would say some of the more expensive headphones, you're going to be able to EQ them more easily than some of the more affordable headphones. Headphones like these and like these, you're going to have to be a bit more careful if you do want to EQ. I wouldn't add a lot of sub bass to the Sonys, otherwise they might come across as a little bit muddy. So now I'm going to go into my points out of 10 comparisons. I've written some notes. So build quality, I'm going to give the Sonys 6 out of 10, and I gave the Beyerdynamics 8 out of 10. Fantastic. These, I throw them around. Well, I don't literally throw them around, but I'm happy to I don't worry about these physically. I can just put them down. These, they just feel like you need to be a little bit more careful. And also, when you close this, I've caught my finger in here a few times. Although it's handy being able to fold these up, it is possible to catch your hand in this mechanism here. So there you go, build quality 6 out of 10. Comfort, now I give these 7 out of 10. I find them very comfortable. However, I would like a little bit more cushioning here, and I did have to replace the pads. The pads these came with they weren't very comfortable at all, and also you don't have that much depth in here. The Beyerdynamics, I gave comfort 8.5 out of 10. Nice and soft velour. This is nice and soft. Clamp force is okay. It's reasonably strong, but it's not too strong. These are round. Now, I would give these 9 out of 10 if these were oval shaped and fit the angle of the ear a bit better. But still, these have the win for comfort. Looks. Now, I would say 7 out of 10. I think the Sonys look fantastic. They do look of their time. They look a bit dated, I would say. The Beyerdynamics, although these aren't the latest X version of these, they look very smart indeed. So again, they take the win. So 8.5 out of 10 for those, and 7 for these. Still good. Features. Okay, so user serviceability. Okay, now features wise, I would say these are standard. The Sonys, you could call the stretchy cable a feature. You could call the fact it's got a adapter for the cable a feature. Foldability, that's a feature. Okay, but you can't detach the cable. And also, this is a little bit more difficult to use a service. You will need to be comfortable using a soldering iron if you do need to replace the cable or replace the band, which you can do with these. It's not very difficult, but not for a beginner. Now, with the Beyerdynamics, everything can be taken apart. The X version, by the way, I think it might have a Velcro strap on top. I know that the Custom One Pro, which I reviewed these with, had Velcro on here as well. But these poppers, they look cool, and they're very easy to take off, and you can then clean your pad whenever you like if this gets a little bit sweaty. The pads are a little bit harder to take off than on the Sonys. They're just a little bit stiffer, which is fine. Good noise isolation because of that. But then if you take these apart, you can literally take the drivers out and replace a driver really easily, and then you don't have to replace the whole headphone. Everything here comes apart much more easily than with the Sonys. Now, drivability. Okay, so drivability is how much do you have to turn up the volume in order to listen to your music at the volume, the level of detail and clarity that you intend to. So I would say that the Sonys are intermediate. So what I mean by intermediate is you can listen to these on your mobile phone, but really to get the best out of these, you might want a portable deck at the very least. Okay, now these don't scale up because they don't have a very powerful magnet. They don't scale up massively if you have a more expensive amp. So there's a limit to how much you'll hear the benefits from having a very powerful amp. However, you want a nice DAC or a nice amp when listening to these. Whilst with the Beyerdynamics, these with their more powerful Tesla magnets, these will benefit more from a slightly more powerful amp. However, drivability is also poor. So really, you are going to notice you're going to have to turn the volume up more with the Beyerdynamics than with the Sonys. So that might be a selling point for you. It might be a reason you want to pick the Sonys, because you can use them with more devices than with the Beyerdynamics. Beyerdynamics, you just need to turn that volume up. You'll need to consider having a slightly more powerful amp, and that might be a factor. Oh, these are the 80 ohm version, by the way. You can get a more powerful, I think 350 ohm version of the 770s as well. Now, sound. Okay, so treble. Now, I would say the treble with these can be a little bit grainy. Okay, the Sonys are they are a nice standard smooth listen. However, if it's a harsh mix, a harsh recording, there's a little bit of sharpness in the mid treble, and also those mid treble notes going into the upper treble can be a little bit grainy. So I would say texture of a not very nice kind sometimes. So some music, it can be a good thing, picking up music which maybe needs a little bit more smoothness in the mix. Okay, so that's something to factor in. Now, the treble with the Beyerdynamics is smoother across the board. Okay, these are smoother than the Sonys, and in fact, because of that, I'm going to say in a little bit, you benefit from the overall separation and imaging of the music with the Beyerdynamics. Okay, now the Sonys, the treble still is good. I would give the treble I would say it's relatively realistic, but it can have that graininess. However, the Beyerdynamics, I would say, actual instruments like the piano or wood instruments, these are my preferred headphone. Okay, electronic music and pop music, the Sonys sound excellent. Okay, bass. Now, the Sonys have a smooth, they have a great detail and a great amount of, I would say they've got a good amount of fun in the mid treble, slight roll off in the sub bass. So not the middle treble, I meant mid bass. Okay, so slight roll off with the sub bass, good amount of information in the mid bass. Okay, and even though the sub bass is relatively rolled off, there's a little, if you turn up the volume, it doesn't, these don't, I would say you don't lose the quality of that bass until you get pretty loud with these headphones. However, there is a relatively large amount of bleed in from the mid bass into vocals on particularly bassy tracks. The Beyerdynamics, they suffer less from that. There can be a little bit of boominess with that mid bass again. 1 week later. Unfortunately, I've been a little bit ill, so as you can see, my beard's grown a little bit in a week. Let's get back to this review. So I was talking about the the bass, and now the vocals. After all of that, I'm going to give them 7 out of 10. I think these are very competent with vocals. They're not heavily drawn back in the mix. There isn't a heavy emphasis on the bass regions and the treble versus and at the expense of the vocals. However, they're competent. There isn't a great width to the staging of the vocals, and but there's quite a nice tonality, relatively natural tonality with those vocals. Soundstage size. Now, these are very much a front, right, left presentation. You don't get much sound beyond here, a little bit, but not much. In front of you, there's just a relatively small space around your head, and not a relatively large number of I would say details between the left, right and middle image. Okay, there's enough to be competent, there's enough detail to be accurate when you're listening to a not very complicated mix. I would recommend these headphones, the Sony's, for mixing modern electronic mixes. I would say because of the bass tones being very much on the periphery rather than coming around here, I would say these are good for singer-songwriter music and for electronic music. Okay, now the Beyerdynamic DT770 Pro, these do more of that filling in of the soundstage around. They've got more of a large space around here, quite a round presentation again, but I wouldn't say they're front, right and left. They fill in a bit here. So if you're listening to orchestral music, then the Beyerdynamics are better. So yeah, so soundstage, I'd say yet again it's a 7 out of 10 with the Sony's. And then separation for me, I'd say it's again a 7 out of 10 for the Sony's. So they're basically competent across the board. When you listen to musical mixes which aren't overly complicated, so let's say if you're listening to a piece of orchestral music which had lots of instruments which are close together and where the vocalist is near to those instruments, you might get a bit muddled with a headphone like this. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it might, but it would mean you would have to rethink about positioning the microphones, positioning your instruments with a decent amount of separation between those instruments and between the vocalist. However, with headphones which are better at defining those individual items, the DT770 Pro are a better choice. Okay, sorry about my voice. So to conclude, the Sony's, they just sound right. Okay, nothing stands out. They're nice, pleasant sounding, pleasant vocals. They're solid performers all round. They can be harsh and reward smooth recordings. Okay, so when there's a harsh mix, they will bring that to the foreground. Okay, I would say they're not the most atmospheric headphones when it comes to classical recordings, complicated recordings, large scale recordings, but any small studio music, very, very good, and they can come across as quite punchy and quite fun when they need to. Okay, now the Beyerdynamics, they can sound special with the right music, with a nice amp, with the right track. Okay, some excellent elements make these my pick. I think the Sony's are an excellent headphone, but if I saw these in a studio, I'd be kind of feeling, yeah, so these are my pick. They have more of a texture, defined texture to the instruments than the Sony's. The Sony's are good at getting I would say a true to a modern mix sound. The Beyerdynamics, if you're honing in on individual instruments and the positioning of those individual instruments, these are better. Okay, so that's it. Let me know, do any of you own the Sony's? Have I helped you decide whether or not you want to buy the Sony's? Obviously there are quite a lot of professional headphones at the £120 price range at the moment. There's a lot of choice out there. I still think these are good buy. Personally, buying these, I think buying them second hand is the way to go. If you can get a pair of these in very good condition, then they're still a good buy. Okay, so that's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I look forward to the next. Okay, so that's it for now. Goodbye. Just very quickly before I go, I'm just going to give a random shout out to a website which I like, which is nothing to do with music, but as you may know, I'm a Star Wars fan and Star Wars obsessed. Have a look at his channel. I know it's nothing to do with music, but I think that guy is amazing and I think his site is very, very entertaining. Anyway, so I just thought I'd give a shout out, and I think maybe I might make this more of a regular occurrence. At the end of my reviews, I might actually give a shout out to the channels that I enjoy watching.